Good morning. Alright. Yippee. Hang on a second. I might pull up. There we go. Turn it down just a little bit. Oh, actually, no, that's really loud on my end. There we go. Alright. So yeah. I had time to stew on it, and I do want to get to Slay the Princess, quickly. I don't want this to detour too much. But I have to talk about this game. At the end of the last stream, Val, pointed something out to me that, like, completely recontextualized my view of the actions of everyone in this game, or a lot of people in this game. And the more I fucking dwell on it, the more I'm like, holy shit, this game actually managed to do something pretty fucking amazing with, what it, was portraying. And, yeah, all my homies fucking hate, Jimmy. Fuck that motherfucker. Jimmy is, like, the most contemptible character I've seen in media recently. And, like, you know, I don't, I'm definitely not as adventurous as other people when it comes to media and that. Like, I tend to stay in video games a lot. There's the odd, like, you know, movie here and there that I'll go and watch, but generally my domain is, like, movies. This is one of the most fucking awful characters I have seen in recent memory. Like, it's fucking crazy how... Oh, yeah, hi, Val. Bitch made. Yeah, like, just... He, like... And the worst part is... The real, like, tragedy of Mouthwashing is that everyone, Curly included, gets it way worse than they should, and Jimmy gets to feel like a hero and out himself. Well, sorry, I need to potentially consider my words here. He goes out thinking that he is a hero, where he is anything but. Like, he is the... Like, we can talk... I'll probably talk about Curly to a extent too, but the main thing I want to, like, focus on here is, like, Jimmy and honestly, the way I missed what was going on. Because I think that creates, like, a delicious irony that actually spells out the point Mouthwashing is trying to make. And we're going to do that by looking through my VOD. So we're going to have a little bit of double thing going on. Give me 2 seconds. Yep, you got the... You pointing at the right tab? No, you're not. I think it's this one? Yes. Alright, cool. So, oh, perfect. That ended at the perfect time. So, alright, well, I'm gonna try and limit myself to 20 minutes here. Because I don't want to go too long, and yeah, there's a lot of Slay the Princess I want to get through. Yeah, so... The thing that I realized, after Val noted the whole Locks discussion, is that, Jimmy sexually assaults Anya. It's probably the biggest thing besides crashing the ship, it's one of the things that sets everything in motion. And there's like two really core things I think Mouthwashing is trying to get at with this story. First off, it's talking about it's talking about how corporate environments absolutely fucking suck at dealing with this shit. Because of people like Curly, honestly. Like, people that can be well-meaning and, might be, closely tied to the people that end up doing shit like this. And are like, no, like, I can change him, like, I know him, like, this is a extant phenomena of his character. Like, there's just a lot about that. There's a lot about the way Curly handles things that I think is mainly the point. That, like, in a corporate environment that is so, like, focused on productivity at the expense of every human it is exploiting for that end, it will allow shit like this to happen and flail and try to make things not have friction as opposed to actually taking responsibility, which is a good bridge into the second point. And that is, like, and sorry, with the capitalist thing, there's obviously, like, rape culture and stuff like that. Like, that is a huge part of that reason there. My second biggest thing I think the game is trying to point at is, like, how does one take responsibility? Like, when you do something wrong, when you specifically wrong a person, how are you how do you approach that? Like, do you say sorry? Do you just say sorry? What do you do to try and make amends? Is it possible to make amends? There's a lot of questions that I think that the game examines through an incredibly extreme scenario where both Jimmy is just unable to actually take responsibility, and Curly just kind of band-aids the situation. And through Curly's negligence, like, if there is there are tragic characters in this. Daisuke and Anya deserve the world, and you know what, Swansea, you're a real one. Like, you're still kind of a piece of shit, but at the end of the day, I can be like, yeah. Like, that, the funny thing is, Swansea is closer to the kind of person Curly thinks Jim is. And the irony is that the game starts off portraying him in a far more negative light. Because he is abrasive. I've met people in my job that are kind of Swansea in terms of they've been there for fucking years. They've been there for years. They're grumpy. They're, things should be done this way, all this kind of stuff. And, obviously, like, these kids today and all that shit. Like, I've met those people. But the thing is that, like, when it comes to specifically trying to repent or take responsibility, like, that phrasing comes up so much in the game, and the more and more I heard it, the more and more corporate it felt. Because neither Curly nor Jimmy are actually trying to... Well, sorry. Curly is closer to taking responsibility than anyone else, right? Like, Jimmy starts fucking up and he gets into the cockpit and ends up, as we see on the screen. But, like, Jimmy's version of taking responsibility is, like, the ultimate corporate approach to it. Of, no, just make everyone happy. Just make the situation go away. Don't think about what it means to actually receive forgiveness. Don't think about whether you actually deserve it either. Because that's definitely not a factor we should consider ever. No. Just make sure everyone is doing their jobs. And the important thing is that people need to There's a very funny video somewhere in the Bimbo Lounge that's like mouthwashing if Anya had gone to Swansea. Yeah, I just want to talk to him. I just want to talk to him. And like, I sent that to Mina, funnily enough. But, like, yeah, no, Swansea is that guy. And in the situation, given the situation, like, yeah, actually. Nah. Jimmy does not deserve the pedestal he has put himself on. Because he cannot take responsibility. Because one of the biggest things about this is, like, okay, like, how do you actually, like, there is a point at which you just have to accept a person is not going to forgive you. Like, if you have genuinely hurt them in a way that is, like, really bad, like, you have to kind of accept that person, you have to kind of accept that person is not, not required to accept an apology or even think better of you for trying to make amends. And yeah, I've already spent 5 minutes just yapping rather than actually covering some of the stuff. Curly deserved to face consequences for his actions, but ended up with consequences far worse than he deserves, and that is incredibly fascinating. Yeah. So, oh yeah, the thing I was saying before. Like, there are tragic characters in this. I think the most horrifying character, honestly, is Curly, because, like, in a lot of ways, he is responsible for all the shit that ends up happening in this game. And there's a moment that a lot of people are making art of where Anya has taken the pills, where like, Curly is just lying there, staring at her. And, like, the idea that you were telling this woman, who was assaulted by the person you were defending, that, no, it'll be okay, we'll smooth it over, like, everything will be fine, that it ended up like that? Ugh. That's terrifying. Okay, so there are a few things I want to go over that came up that happened during the playthrough that I want to, like, talk about. The first one, I think, is the way that Jimmy kind of speaks to Anya as a nurse, which, given the fact that yeah, people have to, don't you think so, nurse Anya. Now, there's already I got, like, the kind of corporate kind of thing of that, of like, oh yeah, no, you have to be worth your title, like, even in this situation where everything has gone to shit, like, you're the nurse, you need to do the thing, there's no room for that, and, like, rolling his eyes at Anya not being able to do it. That just read to me as, like, you know, plain old corporate sexism and shit like that. But this is after Jimmy had assaulted her? Like, I'm sorry. This is, like, this first bit too, where he's talking to Anya and gives Curly the medicine. It, like, spells out a lot of what's going on here. And actually, I'm gonna probably better skipping through it. You know, there's, like, a lot of kind of, like, establishing Jimmy's character and stuff like that. But, like, looking back at it now, it's like, oh, actually, sorry, I should talk about this moment specifically. So Jimmy is already undermining Anya as a nurse in a really disgusting way, given the context of, like, the rest of the game and what he has done to Anya. But, there's also this bit here where, like, it's implied that I think Curly can't swallow things voluntarily. And that, like, Anya has, like, a real sort of, like, problem with getting Curly to take his meds. And it didn't click at the time, but you can see this as a demonstration of, like, the fact that Jimmy is okay with kind of just forcing things to work, you know, in a less assaulty way, but then also just doing things that don't kind of respect one's consent. Which, like, we can't tell if Curly consents to this, which is also another horrifying thing, too, where, like, at the end of the day, Jimmy puts Curly in the fucking, cryopod. But, like, Curly is the person that can, like, survive the least of this shit. The only reason Curly is still alive is thanks to Anya, which, by the way, fucking Jimmy going like, oh yeah, Anya, you should be a better nurse, yet she's keeping a burn victim alive for months. Like, I don't... In the state that Curly is in, I would have thought weeks would have been the maximum. Anya has been keeping on alive for months. Like, it's actually, yeah, phenomenal. But also, the reason that I think Anya actually freaks out here is trauma. Like, it's not that she's a bad nurse. Like, specifically doing something to Curly that he can't consent to is, like, genuinely unnerving her. Because of course it would. She was assaulted. So, like, it's extra fucked up, but it is appropriate that Jimmy doesn't realize that. Or, because that's, like, that's fucking, sexist culture 101 of just, like, not kind of putting two and two together or connecting the dots at all, that there might be a pattern and a reason for things outside of just, they're not doing their job well, which, again, we frame it through corporate needs and stuff like that, which, is supposed to hide the prejudice there, but it's ultimately still born out of it. You don't connect the dots that there might have been trauma from the thing. You fucking did, Jimmy. So then there's this bit here, which, like, fucking Christ, man. I don't know whether to... Curly is fucked in a lot of ways. And the fact that... I have to... Actually, sorry, now that I think about it, there's a... let me get to this point first, because it'll lead into that thing. Like, oh yeah, God. Also, Jesus Christ. I have to believe our worst moments don't make us monsters, Jim. Like, that's like very directly like, hey, Jimmy, that might also apply to you too. But, like, Jimmy is putting this all on Curly. And obviously in the game, you're not meant to know, you don't know who did it, right? You're in first person, and then you walk out and freak out. And given the fact that you're working with the captain's things, you might think, oh yeah, okay, the captain. And then Curly turns up and, like, oh, yeah, that tracks. Although I guess, the character does leave, but, like, obviously given the way that the world warps around him, yeah, it's pretty vague as to whether it might have happened. But, like, you later learn that Jimmy is the one that crashed the ship. And then, like, Jimmy is fully... Like, Curly can't say shit. And Jimmy just fully puts that onto him. And now that I think about it, at the end of the game, there's a scene where Curly is talking to Jimmy. And, like, it's the most Curly speaks, I think, throughout the entire game after he receives the injuries he does. And he says something to the effect of, like, hey, don't worry about it. Like, I'm going to take the fall for this, and you're going to be the good man. Like, just like you wanted. And I actually don't know now if that is a hallucination or genuinely what Curly has been saying. I think it's really fucking horrific if Curly continues to be like, nah, I'll take the fall for this, considering everything that happens. But, yeah, it's just like... Jesus Christ, man. Like, not only are you completely ignoring the fact that, like, maybe Anya is actually unnerved by the fact that you specifically still have to be the captain, like the person that assaulted her, and is currently pregnant with your child. Like, ugh. On top of that, just, like, fully put the blame on Curly, someone who cannot, like, actually defend their actions or anything like that. It's just the fucking worst. Oh, and then this scene. So... you eventually go back and you come into the Blood River as Curly. And I was questioning, like, I saw a Q&A that said, like, oh yeah, we were going to actually make it ambiguous whether or not you were controlling Curly or Jimmy in certain scenes. Um, and I thought to myself, oh yeah, maybe that's what's happening here. But I think this is actually Curly. And I don't know if I want to, like, think... I don't know if the thing I want to get from this is that Curly was actually going insane. But I do think that there's something here to, like, gigantic fucking emergency signs flying in his face as he walks towards Jim, the guy he knows assaulted Anya, and, like, the previous conversation, like, not taking any of the fucking, a psyche val seriously. Like, it's just like, bro, red flags, and then there's, like, the son of, like, the impending thing that is going to happen to him, if he doesn't avert course. Like, I think this is just purely foreshadowing, in a lot of ways. I don't know how, like, diegetically it would kind of work, because I think... Because the sequences that have this kind of stuff are mostly Jimmy. I think this is the only one we experience as Curly, of the ship, like, not being the way it should be. So but I don't really care. Like, the symbolism is really great, that, and then Curly steps into the room and just continues the conversation like normal. And it's just like, okay, we're just ignoring that happened, and we're going, hey, Jim boy me Bob, my buddy. Hey, how you going? Psyche Val time. Yeah, it's just fucking unbelievable. Yeah, then they find the mouthwashing, they make the cake, and we've got, I can't remember what this bit is. Oh yeah, Swansea and Anya talking in the cockpit, which... later on, I think is, like, heavily implied to be, oh, actually, here. We need to stop right here. It's heavily implied that, like, Swansea is actually told by Anya what was happening. And, like, to some degree, there's... Swansea is an interesting comparison between Curly and Jimmy for a lot of reasons. But, like... And I've seen some people be critical of Swansea specifically in this scenario, but I think Swansea's inaction makes more sense than Curly's, because Curly could have actively stopped something. Swansea is more just like, okay, well, I need to think of a contingency here. And, like, honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if he was, like, saving that pod for Anya too. Like, it could have been Daisuke, it could have been Anya. Given the situation, he might think that both of them are going to die, or one of them is going to die, and he can at least save one of them. But I think, like, at the point that the crew are in when Swansea starts learning about this, which I believe is only after the crash, yeah, it's more like this guy is actually unhinged. He actually is the captain, and potentially has access to a gun, given the fact that he's the captain. Gotta be really careful about this shit, and that's why I think he starts doing the things he does in terms of clearing out the utility room and getting the, guarding the utility room, rather. So yeah. This scene is, I think, important, because I didn't realize something here. And probably another set of gross sounds. Yep. Yeah, right on cue. Like, when I heard that initially, I thought it was, like, Curly, flailing and potentially choking on things. However, given how abusive Jimmy is, I no longer think that. I think he was, like, actually forcing it down in a really violent way, which is why Curly ends up kind of crying here. Yeah, it's fucked. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah, the dead pixel. Oh my god. So, the dead pixel analogy is so good. Hey, what's up? As a, it's so good as an analogy for this kind of shit. And it's the kind of thing that, like, you see it, and then you can't not see it, right? Like, no matter what happens, you are always going to hear or see that. Sorry, hold on a second. The timer went off. I'm gonna give myself an extra 5, I think. So that'll take me to 9:50. Yeah, that should be fine. The dead pixel is such a good analogy for this kind of shit. Where like once you see it, you can't unsee it. But if you're not looking for it, you don't see it, right? And it very much it's a fantastic fucking metaphor for like seeing another side of someone, for example. Like, once you've seen them be abusive or say something like really, really sexist or racist or something, that like you can't help but look at that person in that way anymore. Like you can't leave your mind. Like, yeah, it might have been innocuous to you before, but now that you look at it through the knowledge that the dead pixel exists, you can't not see how that looks as a result. And Curly here being like, no, I don't see it, but I guess I've always been looking at the bigger picture, is like, yeah, that's like actually again, really great analogy, because Curly might see the dead pixel eventually, but he's a big picture guy. He's not realizing it, but he's not realizing it until it's a bigger problem. Like, the one dead pixel is not the problem to him because he will not see it. He's not one to take, like, there's a lot of ways you can read into it, but one way I choose to read into it is that Curly will see, because he knows that Anya was assaulted by Jimmy. Like, he knows that at this point. And this is where the locks discussion comes up too. But like, he knows that and is still like, nah, Jim's a good guy. It's like that's so frustratingly accurate to how a lot of men will treat situations like this. It's like, fuck me. Yeah, and then there's the horse maze, which I've definitely seen a fair few comments on like the whole the cartoon horse is making me horny, but like actually that's an indication that Jimmy's been sexually frustrated for a while, which is probably the reason he ends up doing what he does, but like, that ain't no reason, buddy. Yeah, and then Jimmy ends up sending Daisuke through the fucking vent, which ends up with him bleeding. So I was a little confused as to what actually happened in this scenario. I'm still thinking that Daisuke got injured on the way through the vent into the room where Anya took the pills. And I thought a couple of times that like maybe Anya actually attacked him to stop him, but that would imply that people would have been able to get in the room, blah, blah, blah. But you can actually see that blood is actually dragged out of the vent. So I think Daisuke was injured before he actually managed to get out into the medical room. And evidently he still managed to open it. But yeah, this is kind of where like it becomes more and more obvious that Jimmy's just like... Also, like, oh my god. Like, Jimmy, like, being condescending even in this scenario too, and just like not even a thought about like, oh yeah, trauma and that we probably I need to try and handle the trauma side of things specifically. But no, it's just like, hey, the medicine's in that room. Anya, don't lock the door. Can you hear me? Okay, well, we need to bust in. Like, at no point do we consider like Anya's emotions other than the fact that she's going to do something extreme. And given that she's locked in the room with Curly, Jim, like, the only person Jimmy actually cares about is Curly, which is, like, you're the captain of the ship, take responsibility, blah, blah, blah. But, like, yeah, it's fucked. And I think this is where we start seeing the conversations between, Anya and Curly, about the gun. Which, again, like, that was a thing that just flew right by me. I did not know what to make of that at the time. Yeah, then... is there anything else, like, really... No, I don't think there's much else to actually say in terms of stuff I missed. Though I will say, like, I don't know how much I like this interpretation. I'm still kind of mulling on it, but there is something to, like, so in these sequences, he confronts, like, three people: Curly, Swansea, and the baby. Oh, and Daisuke. But like, there isn't Anya. Anya doesn't appear in this. Anya is, like, just a womb, which is just, again, like, horrifyingly accurate to this kind of, like, what do you call it? Horrifyingly accurate to this kind of, like, attitude, obviously extrapolated a lot. But the thing that comes out of the womb is, like, partially like a horse, like a cartoon horse, like Polly. And, like, I think there's something to the fact that Anya is only represented as a womb, basically, and the actual danger is what's in Anya. There's, like, a couple of lines earlier on where Curly gets fed medicine, where Jimmy's like, what would she do? And that's, like, the most he ever acknowledges the thing that actually happened. Which, like, the ultimate thing I will say at the end is that I think the way the game dances around it, when you don't get it, like, and you don't get it, is a perfect demonstration of how this shit is perpetuated. But to stop on this for a second, there's something really disgusting. Fucker doesn't even think of her as a person, even in the end. Yeah, and you know what? The thing coming out of her here, the thing coming out of her is a cartoon horse. I choose to interpret that as, like, the thing he is worried about the most in that particular scenario is the fact that it will impact his corporate standing. Like, that is why the baby is the fucking Pony Express horse. It's not that oh god, I have to raise a child. It's not, oh god, I've traumatized this woman. It's not the combination of the two, of having to actually take responsibility and do that throughout this whole process. It's the fact that he will impact his job. Just, and thus the thing coming out of her is something that is dangerous from the company. Like, the thing inside Anya is a corporate bomb waiting to go off for him. And that is just the most disgusting fucking framing you could ever look at this through. It's sickening. It sickens me to my stomach. Jimmy does not deserve what he got. Before I make my, like, bigger point about, like, the kind of irony of my playthrough in this, Jimmy does not deserve what he got. In the end, he got to put the guy who was running defense for him into the cryopod and saying, like, I fixed it. I did it. I managed to get out of this scenario. And now I'm going to take actual responsibility and shoot myself. You don't deserve that. That is the fucking coward's way out. You should actually, like, if anyone deserves the fucking burns that Curly has, it's fucking Jimmy. Curly took the brunt of that, and God, if he actually, and, like, obviously it's out of the thing, and, like, when Curly does actually talk, it's, specifically in Jimmy's imagination, which I choose to believe is just Jimmy reassuring himself ultimately. Like, actually, I don't think Curly ever talks to him. I genuinely think Jimmy is putting the words in Curly's mouth that he wants to hear, but, like, the irony is that is actually indistinguishable from what Curly actually treats Jim like. So I could believe that he's just like, nah, I'll still take the fall for this. But, like, the only time he actually expresses himself is when Jimmy takes the gun after Anya's dead, because he starts laughing. And it's like, and it didn't, at the moment, it didn't strike me, but at that point, I think I was still on the train of like, oh yeah, it's still Curly, like, this is all your fault, you asshole. But, like, looking back, it's just like, yeah, I think that's when Curly just, like, succumbs to all of this. It's just like, this went down the literal worst route possible. I fucked up incredibly bad here. Oops. And so, what I'd like to leave this discussion with, is something ironic that happens here. Because I did not see this. When I was playing the game, I did not see what, Wait, why isn't that disappearing? Hello? Chrome? Oh, there we go. I did not see what... I didn't interpret what Jim had done correctly. I thought that they were fooling around, and that, like, obviously... And that, like, Jimmy... Well, yeah, like, I thought they were fooling around, and Anya was, like, genuinely freaking out. Like, not a, oh god, women freaking out, but, like, a genuine, like, oh, yeah, okay, you got the gun because you're, like, you're feeling incredibly unsafe. In a particularly vulnerable moment, and even though it doesn't actually help you per se, like, whatever protection and control you can grasp from the situation you can get. And even when Curly and Jimmy were talking about, like, yeah, this is going to be a disaster, our jobs are on the line, like, what are we going to do? And then Jim goes and fucking crashes the ship. It didn't click what was going on. It didn't click what Curly was excusing or trying to defend Jim from. And looking back at it now, there's some really delicious irony that me, cis man playing this game, just, like, it didn't click, and the way that the language that Curly and Jim used to speak about what happened is so, like, divorced from the actual actions that take place that is another demonstration of how this shit is perpetuated. You've got the person that explicitly does the thing and, you know, doesn't actually take responsibility for anything. You've got the person who will run defense because they think they know that person better, and obviously there would be big consequences for big thing they did wrong, which, yeah, that's meant to be the point. But you've got the third party to this, in my scenario, where you've got person who is listening to this, or listening to the sanitized version of this, and using that as a way to look at Anya. Because I wasn't taking Anya seriously either. It should have been a redder flag to me that she went for a gun when she was found to be pregnant. Or at least in the midst of the conversation about being pregnant and that. Like, it's just, like, a fucking perfect trifecta of how this shit perpetuates. It's, oh god, it's so fucking good, dude. Yeah. All my fucking homies hate Jimmy. That cunt deserved far more than what he got. Yeah. I think, yeah, and the line now, take responsibility, is just, like, permanently poisoned for me now, because, like, it's just such a, it's such a fucking cop-out. It's Jimmy's cop-out in this scenario. Like, it's got nothing to do with actually taking responsibility, and it's got everything to do with, like, trying to get away from the actual responsibility. Like, it is ironically, it is, oh my god, words. It's not about taking responsibility, it's about appearing to take responsibility. But obviously Jimmy doesn't look at it that way. Oh, fuck. This game is gonna live rent-free in my head for a very long time, I can tell. It's so fucking good. And it's like, on one hand, I really hate that I missed what the game was doing, but on the other hand, it's so appropriate that I missed what it was doing, because you only ever look at it through the framing that Jimmy and Curly provide, which is so sanitized and divorced from the fucking disgusting shit that Jimmy did to Anya. Ugh. And again, in that conversation, Jimmy is focused on the fact that it will impact him and Curly's careers, and not the fact that Anya has to give birth on a ship. On a ship. Like, the fact that Anya is pregnant is irrefutable proof of what Jimmy did, and Jimmy is more worried about the consequences corporately than of, like, the impact he has had on this woman. Fuck me. This game makes me feel like someone in the team went through something like this, or knows someone that went through something like this, because it's so fucking real. Yeah, like, it's so on point in the way that Curly and Jimmy dance around what actually happened. Yeah. Also, like, to a final thought, just, like, extant from everything, but, like, Swansea, like, opening his heart to Daisuke before he ends up killing him, is, like, oh, man. Like, I genuinely don't know if Swansea was saving the pod for him, Anya or Daisuke specifically. I think it could work for either, or just, like, keeping as many open, so they might have to choose eventually, but, like, yeah. But, like, him kind of going, like, mate, you should have been a person that, like, actually, you shouldn't have ended up like me and old, or you don't get to grow up to be like me, old and kind of tired from all this shit. Like, you're just done. And yeah, you really could have, like, changed things for me, and that's, yeah, fuck.